be advised that this recorded webinar has been edited from its original format, which may have included a product demo. To set up a live demo or to request more information, please complete the form to the right. Or if you are currently not on CSE Global, there is a link to the website in the description of this video. Thank you.
Hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Building an Effective Strategy to Bolster Your Domain Security in 2023. My name is Christy DeMayo-Ziegler, and I will be your moderator. Joining us today is Justin Hartland and Patrick Hauss. Justin is CSE's Global Director of Products for the Digital Brand Services Division. Justin has spent more than 20 years in the domain name and brand protection industry and brings his wealth of knowledge to CSE's clients. Justin focuses on ensuring that CSE provides market-leading products and solutions to our global client base. Prior to working in product management, Justin serves in various roles within the account management and marketing teams at CSE, and is a thought leader and regular contributor to CSE's blog and other industry-leading news outlets. Patrick is the Head of Corporate Development and Strategic Alliances, EMEA, based in Paris for CSE's Digital Brand Services Division. Patrick is responsible for key strategic initiatives across Europe and Middle East countries. Before joining CSE, Patrick held positions with major French companies, including bank and telecom, where he oversaw the technology contract negotiation process and was responsible for data, privacy compliance, brand protection, and trademark and domain name management. And with that, let's welcome Justin and Patrick.
Thank you, Christy, and hi everyone. I'm Patrick Hauss, Head of Corporate Development at CSE. Today we will cover how to set up a domain management strategy fit for today's cyber environment. We'll also go through with my colleague Justin Hartland assessing and optimizing your existing domain portfolio. And we'll finish with basically how using domain threat intelligence to ensure efficiency in enforcement activities. As an introduction, I wanted to remind you why it is important to protect a domain portfolio. There are many reasons. One of the reasons is brand protection, since the domain name is the unique address of a website on the internet. That's why a domain name portfolio is essential for protecting a company's brand identity on the internet. By securing multiple domain names related to their brand, companies can ensure that their customers find their website easily and prevent competitors from creating confusion with similar domain names. Online reputation is also key. Domain names can be used to create a positive online reputation for a company. By owning domain names related to their brands and using them to create quality content, companies can establish themselves as leaders in their industry and protect their reputation from competitors who might use their similar domain to misrepresent their brand. Another element to consider is investment. Domain names can be valuable assets that a company can appreciate in value over time. By building a domain name portfolio, organization can create an investment opportunity that could provide a return on investment in the future. Last but not least, owning a domain name portfolio allows the organization to prevent brand abuse and fraud. Cyber squatting is very popular and appeared in the late 90s, but there are many other ways brands can be attacked with domains. In summary, protecting a domain name portfolio is essential for brand protection, establishing a positive online reputation, investment opportunities, and preventing cybercrime. As a consequence, securing a domain portfolio is business critical, since the different stakeholders allowing the domain ecosystem to work are all outside the firewall and are easier targets for cybercriminals. So what kind of attacks are brands experiencing when it comes to domain names? There are two categories of attacks. First, the ones targeting your own domain portfolio, especially when domains are managed by a consumer-grade registrar. Keynote speakers like Brian Krebs have been very vocal on this topic, highlighting that DNS and domain hijacking, but also domain shadowing, became serious threats to brand owners. Second, the one using your brands to perform attacks. Phishing, social engineering are still increasing everywhere, and the attacks are very often based on typo or lookalike domains. Speaking about threat vectors, I didn't want to forget about subdomain takeover, which is a direct consequence of both lack of rules within the cloud hosting providers and a huge need for cyber hygiene at brand level. Also, what we usually see is that brands would have many different providers to address these different issues. CSE is conducting many surveys on a regular basis, especially our annual domain security report, which we produce every year. The 2022 version is available on our website, cscdbs.com. If we look specifically at high-threat TLDs, you can easily notice on your screen which are the top-level domains which are the most used to perform phishing or spam, for example. Again, this will help brand owners to build their domain security strategy with the two necessary angles, which are, one, considering the domains they want to protect in order to secure their brand online, and two, what are the TLDs they should be looking after more specifically when monitoring third-party domain registrations and online infringements. On this slide, we're not looking at the right of the dot anymore, but to the actual domains which have been registered by third parties on the .com. All these examples are very convincing lookalike domains using Homoglyph. Homoglyph domains are deceptive domains which look similar to legitimate domains, but the domain exploits similarities between what we call ASCII characters and characters of other scripts which are non-Latin. Brands need to pay attention to Homoglyph attacks since they have been used in many cases of business email compromise scams. By using different tactics, like combining high-threat TLDs together with Typo and/or lookalike domains, it's very easy and very quick for bad actors to put malicious websites online. Here are some examples of real websites which have been detecting using CSE 3D monitoring capabilities. Basically, from copycat pages to phishing pages, again, the risk of not putting in place an actual domain security strategy is huge for brand owners. Domain security is one topic covering many aspects, but there are always the same key and core components which all need to be included in a holistic security program. These elements are all business critical and require C-level people's attention. So what are the questions? Which are my vital domains? Am I using a tool like CSE domain security to identify my business critical assets? Do I have the right amount of domains? Considering the variety of attacks, shall I consider extending my defensive registrations in order to mitigate risks? Or shall I use other mechanisms in order to protect my brand? Do I have the right end-to-end workflow in place in order to mitigate domain-based attacks with threat intelligence? We will now dig into some of the details with my colleague Justin Hartland. Justin, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Patrick. So what I'm going to talk about today is really a framework that you can look at to help devise your domain strategy, taking into account all of these different threat vectors that Patrick's already mentioned. Really, to mitigate risk, there's a number of things that we can do, and I'll walk you through these. So at the heart, we have the brand. We can register domains. We can block domains from being registered, we can monitor domains, and we can secure those domains down. And I'll kind of go into that in a bit more detail on the next slide. So registrations. Historically, we have looked at a number of aspects to do with a registration to work out whether there is high risk or low risk. Those historic things have been the price of the domain. So some domains registries will charge very, very high prices. Some domains they'll charge extremely low prices. And that's obviously a barrier to whether fraudsters want to take that name. There's another aspect which is the demography. So if it's a TLD in a big country such as UK, then obviously more people are registering domains, using domains, and so that can increase the risk and the threats to that brand. The final is rules. So some registries require a trademark when you register a domain. Obviously, if that's the case, then the risks to you are very limited because you are the only person with that trademark. However, many registries require no rules whatsoever. Some might have sort of partial rules, as in you need to provide local presence or have your name servers within the country. But, you know, in general, it's still relatively easy for somebody within that country to still register those names. So all of these are the traditional risk factors that we've looked at when advising customers on what names to register. The final piece, and Patrick covered this earlier, is really a new aspect to this, which is the security profile of a domain extension. So some domains may not have, you know, may not be the cheapest, may not have a clear demography, you know, a high demography. You know, the rules could be relaxed, but they are actually a TLD that's used heavily in malware, in phishing attacks, etc. So we've seen with certain extensions, I can give you an example such as .cu has been used heavily for phishing attacks. This wouldn't really be something that companies would look to register proactively, but we would advise customers to consider perhaps some of their core brands to proactively look at registering. Additionally, there are TLDs out there, which are CC-TLDs, which have been repurposed. Some examples of this are .ai, for artificial intelligence, or .pr, for public relations. And so those sort of TLDs are getting used by companies and are generally, you know, tick a few of these boxes, such as price and rules, where they're low. And so what we're seeing is companies should really be paying attention to TLDs outside of these traditional rules that we've put in place for what should be registered. So going back to the chart that we showed earlier, we'll just have a quick look at an example next. So moving forward with this, I've just taken a snapshot of the data that Patrick showed earlier, just to look at some of the TLDs where there is a high frequency of fraud. And as you'll see, there are TLDs here which generally companies may not consider registering. There are TLDs that I just mentioned, .ly, which is used as a shortener, which has become common, .io, which again has been used for technology use. So, but then we also see some of the new GTLDs like .sbs, commonly used in fraudulent behavior. But then other sort of lesser known CC-TLDs, such as GD, ZM, etc. So really putting this security piece as part of your domain strategy is super important now, because it's not just, oh, I need to protect my .co.uk's, my .frs, my .hk's, my .cn's. There's a broader set of TLDs that companies really need to dig in and understand, should I be protecting my marks in those? Not because I am actively selling into those countries, but more because the chances of fraud and malware and threats against your brand are higher. Another way that brands can now protect their marks is by blocking. Now, not every registry offers this, and it's a limited amount of TLDs, predominantly the new GTLDs. However, there's over 250 domains that you can protect against. Some of these offerings do allow for variants. Some occasionally offer wildcards. But what this does do is it does mitigate the risk of infringement across those TLDs, which at the moment, some of those TLDs may be higher priced and may not be attractive to fraudsters. But like the domain industry is constantly changing, where TLDs are being bought and sold by different companies, and they are changing the rules and regulations and the pricing of those. So by putting in these blocking products, you do stop companies or stop other people from taking your brands. This is not a silver bullet, however, because like I said, there's a restriction on the variants, and as we know, certain industries have different types of domains where they might add online or tickets or some other term and variant against your brand. But it will mitigate the risk 100% for exact matches and some variants. And the other good thing about this is, if you look at a value for money, the price per domain when you get these blocking products is certainly relatively low, but it's certainly cheaper than if you were to register all of these and just have them sat in your portfolio. So it's definitely something to consider when you're putting together your domain strategy. So I'm moving on now to talk about the actual security around the domain names that you have. So on one hand, you can register a domain name. You mitigate the risk of somebody doing something with that domain. But what you also need to do is mitigate the risk of somebody misusing a domain that you own. And there are various things that you can do. Here we've got some simple things that you need to look out for. And this is across the portfolio of names that you own today. And we highly recommend that companies look at this because there are definite risks and threats. So I'll just walk through these individually. So first is DNS hosting. Make sure that you have a resilient DNS infrastructure. This helps prevent against things such as DDoS attacks and is vitally important to make sure that your business keeps running online. DNSSEC, so for those who don't know what this is, it's a simple authentication between the different levels of DNS. And it's relatively simple to implement. And what we can prevent with that is man-in-the-middle attacks. So people somehow getting into the chain of DNS to then redirect your legitimate traffic to another website. We'll move on to SPF, DMARC, and DKIM. So these are all different standards for email. And so they help legitimize your email rather than allowing other people to spoof. Multi-lock, so this is a registry and registrar lock. So if your account is ever compromised and somebody tries to change your name servers to point your domains to another site, with this locking mechanism, there's password protections, which without having those, which they won't, they'll be unable to do that. So it's a real simple and easy way of ensuring that your critical names don't get compromised. CAA records, this is a record that you put in the zone, and by doing so, you basically say, I'm only ever going to use CSE Trusted Secure as my SSL provider. No other certificates can be placed on the domain. And so if somebody does somehow compromise your domains, they can't set up with a Let's Encrypt certificate, for example, and they just, that stops because all the CAA providers have to adhere to this ruling. And then the final is use an enterprise class registrar. Using a registrar like CSE, you're ensuring that we have things such as two-factor authentication in our portals, that our staff are trained to understand social engineering. There are other providers, more retail providers, that don't have the same security protocols in place. So we would always advise that you look at this on who's managing your domain names today.
Thank you very much, Justin. There's one actually final thing to cover. It's of course impossible to register all domains, and this is domain monitoring. So through this presentation, we've already been able to highlight how phishing, for example, can be used in order to perform malicious activities. But when it comes to domain-based threats, phishing, of course, is not the only concern, since there are many other threat vectors out there on the internet, which are going basically from brand abuse to brand infringement, but also brand fraud. And basically, from traffic diversion to duplicated site content, or from misuse of unofficial logo to potential brand confusion, the risks are pretty much everywhere and can have basically a very dramatic effect or consequences, or even take your whole business down. So considering the importance of these risks, CSE has invested in technology and people in order to offer new threat intelligence solutions. One of them is 3D monitoring and enforcement. And I'm going to go through some of the details of 3D. So how is 3D monitoring and enforcement different from legacy domain monitoring services? So there's a lot of service providers out there on the market, and they're all pretty much similar ways to search within the domain name space. So now I will go through some of the specifics of how they are different, basically. So typically, these legacy services look at exact matches, cousin variations, IDN, or wildcard searches. You have some examples here on your screen, like the type of domains that can be detected using, I would say, basic domain monitoring. But what we do now with 3D is basically be able to bring in more results, more data to our clients who are monitoring their brands. We're now able to include results such as fuzzy matches, homoglyphs, which I spoke a bit earlier today during the presentation, or homophones, which are basically phonetic variations of one brand within a domain. So you have here some examples using like non-Latin characters, or even all these like lookalike domains that you're going to be able to detect, which is basically much more than what used to be detected. And that's really thanks to artificial intelligence and MLDS, which is machine learning deep search that we have implemented within our tools. So the 3D monitoring deliverables come in three main parts. So first, daily domain alerts, monthly reports, and our 24/7 threat command center team. So the daily alerts basically come with the newly added domains, newly registered domains, the re-registered domains, but also the dropped domains. This daily alert will be very useful for you if you want to have a close pulse on what's going on in the domain name space, and it allows you to see if there is any domain you want to register yourself as well. The monthly report is a wider view of what is going on, including the analysis of the domain name and categorization of the domain name behaviors. Is it basically suspected brand abuse, or is it suspected fraud abuse, or is it just a dormant domain, for example? 3D also include our tracked domain status using both technology and human analysts to update our clients on the domain behavior. The TCC team will then be there to monitor behaviors and enforce infringement when needed on a 24/7 basis. So as a conclusion, I just really wanted to reinforce that domain security is one topic covering many different aspects, like securing your own domain portfolio, but also using threat intelligence in order to mitigate risks. And this, of course, requires a holistic approach in order to be really efficient in order to fight cybercrime. So CSE experts are, of course, available to discuss all these topics with you at your earliest convenience. I wanted to thank you very much for your attention today. That concludes the webinar.